Everyone knows The Sound of Music as a polished, timeless classic, but what if hidden mistakes were sitting right in front of you? One scene in particular was never edited, and once you notice it, the moment becomes unforgettable. That small slip is only the beginning. From awkward cuts that break the flow to odd details that don't belong, we've uncovered 13 surprising bloopers that found their way into the final film. They're easy to miss at first, but once seen, they change how you watch forever. Are you ready to take a closer look? Behind the hillside magic, one of the most iconic images in film history is Julie Andrews spinning atop a sunlit meadow, arms outstretched, singing the title number, The Sound of Music. It looks effortless, but behind that breathtaking shot was a combination of technical headaches, physical discomfort, and even frustration from locals. To capture the sweeping view, the crew relied on a helicopter-mounted camera, an unusual technique in the mid-1960s. The cameraman was strapped to the aircraft, flying straight toward Andrews as she twirled in the open field. The problem? Helicopters are incredibly loud. Andrews couldn't hear her cues to begin singing and spinning, so choreographer Mark Bro crouched in the bushes with a megaphone, shouting instructions over the roar of the rotors. Each time the helicopter passed, its downdraft was so powerful it knocked Andrews off balance, flinging her into the grass. She later joked that she was constantly spitting dirt and hay. It took 6 or 7 attempts to capture a usable take, each time with Andrews being blown over by the force of the wind. Not even nature was helpful. The stunning views had belonged to a farmer who agreed at first to keep the tall grasses standing for the filming. But when the crew returned, the grass had already been mowed, and they had to hastily create the scene out of less dramatic blades. The crew built an artificial stream and even moved trees for Andrews to dance among. The farmer got understandably fed up as the filming dragged on, especially since helicopters and crews were disturbing his cattle. But the results? Magic. So many greens, sparkling brooks, and the illusion of spontaneity. In fact, it was a very tight ship, even by new planting standards. The shot became the photograph that defined the film itself, a reminder that what looks natural on screen is seldom achieved without the greatest effort. You thought helicopters were risky? The next scene brought danger much closer to the actors. When injuries shaped the film, while The Sound of Music is remembered for its polished charm, not everything went smoothly during production. Some of the most memorable sequences came at a physical cost to the actors, while others were altered in the editing room to improve pacing. Together, these changes shaped the final version of the film in ways audiences might never suspect. The most serious on-set accident involved Charmian Carr, who played Liesl. During the 16 going on 17 number, she danced with Daniel Truitt inside the glass-walled gazebo. Near the end of filming, Carr slipped on the slick floor, lost her balance, and crashed through a pane of plate glass. She injured her ankle badly enough to require bandaging. Rather than delay the shoot, the crew quickly treated her, covered the injury with makeup, and disguised her movements so the scene could be completed. The actual gazebo presented another hurdle. The genuine structure in Salzburg was too small for shooting, so the production team proceeded to build a bigger replica on the Fox lot in LA for better ease of camera work. Julie Andrews, too, left her own subtle but enduring mark on the music of the score. At the end of Do Re Mi, she added a note in an octave higher than that in the written score. Later, she explained it by saying that it was simply because she could hit it. That ornament became almost one of the hallmark moments of the song, though sadly, Andrews would lose her upper register after a botched throat procedure in 1997. Editing also reshaped the rhythm of the movie because several filmed scenes stayed on the cutting room floor. Liesl introducing Rolf to Maria, the captain's solo rendition of Edelweiss in the garden. According to director Robert Wise, they were decluttering the slowing pace of the narrative. These cuts and sharper transitions created a more vibrant tempo in the film. Injuries, improvisation, and meticulous editing all went into creating what audiences know today as this seamless experience. The outcome might feel effortless, but it is forged from resilience, quick thinking, and bold decisions behind the scenes. When The Sound of Music opened in 1965, few predicted a runaway phenomenon. Early reviews were mixed. Some critics found it old-fashioned as Hollywood tilted toward grittier fare, but audiences answered with thunderous enthusiasm. Within 4 weeks, it climbed to number 1 at the box office, then simply refused to leave. By late 1966, it had surpassed Gone with the Wind to become the all-time highest grosser, a title it held for 5 years. In total, it sold more than 283 million tickets worldwide, and its original runs and 2 major re-releases generated about $286 million at the time, astronomical figures for a musical. It broke attendance and revenue records in 29 countries and, in many cities, remained on screens for 4.5 years. What powered that endurance wasn't only the postcard scenery and earworm melodies, it was the film's emotional clarity. The story fused romance, family, and moral courage in a way broad audiences could instantly understand, while Julie Andrews' radiant presence and crystalline vocals anchored every scene. Families would keep coming back because the movie checked all the boxes for repeat viewing. For children, the Von Trapps most enjoyed showing how to really play. In some cases, love was preferred over authoritarian abandonment shadows that lengthened in darkness. Publicity grew word of mouth, turning common viewings into collective get-togethers wherein viewers sang softly, then would later bring along friends. The Sound of Music was equally at home in cinemas and living rooms. Its melodies filled the airwaves, its filming locations drew pilgrims to Salzburg, and its imagery, from Julie Andrews twirling on the hilltops to the family's final mountain escape, became symbols of joy, resilience, and freedom. This was the path through years of pulling down social curtains. Evenings in the light of the projection screen provided uplift without innocence, but sometimes reminded the audiences that this could house tenderness along with defiance. More than box office figures, its success proves that a project once doubted by insiders was really a phenomenon beyond expectation. Julie Andrews, the perfect gamble. When the filmmakers of The Sound of Music began casting Maria, they faced a dilemma. Writer Ernest Lehman believed there was only one actress capable of bringing warmth, humor, and sincerity to the role: Julie Andrews. He was so sure that he reportedly declared, "As far as I'm concerned, there's only one person to play this role." Yet in 1964, Andrews wasn't yet a household name. She had just completed Mary Poppins and the Americanization of Emily, neither of which had been released, and she was still best known for her stage work in My Fair Lady and Camelot. Hollywood executives were less convinced. Jack Warner had famously passed her over for the film adaptation of My Fair Lady, claiming she wasn't photogenic enough for the screen. Studio heads circulated lists of bankable stars: Doris Day, Grace Kelly, Shirley Jones, Angie Dickinson, and Bancroft, Carol Lawrence, and Leslie Caron were all considered. Mia Farrow even auditioned multiple times for a younger role. Any one of them could have changed the film's legacy. However, the thing that Robert Wise had was a secret advantage. He had viewed some early footage of Mary Poppins before it was actually released and straightaway recognized Andrews as a star. He went rushing in to lock her up before other competing studios figured it out for themselves. Andrews signed the contract for the part at a mere $225,000, a respectable sum, of course, but no share in profits. When she would soon be commanding $1 million a film, this contract would have made her seem all the more underrated. The mention of Andrews does, however, give way to another worry regarding this particular role. Her first question to Wise was, "How are you going to get all the sugar out of this picture?" She felt, you see, that the story was going to be very, very sentimental, and she wanted to have assurance that all the sugar was going to be getting balanced out. In fact, that gut feeling was pretty critical. Her realistic sweetness kept the film sincere rather than saccharine. It's a clear choice now. In reality, however, Julie Andrews' casting was a bold risk, a risk that turned an up-and-coming talent into a legend and handed up a performance that would be considered one of cinema's greatest. Christopher Plummer's reluctant yes, while Julie Andrews was quickly locked in to play Maria. Securing the right actor for Captain George Von Trapp proved far more complicated. The man who eventually embodied the stern naval officer with hidden warmth, Christopher Plummer, nearly walked away from the role multiple times. At first glance, the character as written felt too stiff and one-dimensional to him. He described the captain as a cardboard cutout of an authoritarian father, and Plummer was uninterested in playing a lifeless stereotype. The studio explored other big names. Sean Connery, Richard Burton, Bing Crosby, and Yul Brynner were all discussed as potential leads. Each brought star power, but none seemed to strike the right balance of authority and vulnerability. Plummer, though hesitant, remained their top choice. Still, he refused to sign until significant changes were made. Plummer wrote directly to screenwriter Ernest Lehman, outlining his concerns. He wanted Von Trapp to be more than a rigid disciplinarian. He wanted layers. He put forth for the captain being worldly, charming, and capable of humor. But, he added, let the gradually softening of his heart be through the influence of Maria. He also asked for different kinds of scenes, stern with Elsa, tender with Maria. Greatly, this was agreed by the creating team. Lehman and director Robert Wise reshaped important scenes to stress this depth, and Plummer later admitted that those changes let him commit to the role fully. He even argued for a solo musical moment, hoping to show the captain's inner conflict through a song. Not all his suggestions made it to the cut, but being part of that collaboration had its payoff for him. It made possible a performance with gravitas, yet one that was vulnerable as well, and turned Von Trapp into a character both commanding and relatable. Plummer might have chafed, but in fact, complexity raised the stakes. Without such demands, the captain would have remained flat. Instead, Plummer's version became unforgettable, proving that hesitation sometimes leads to brilliance. Rain delays and rising tensions. Despite its idyllic appearance on screen, filming The Sound of Music in Salzburg and Bavaria was anything but smooth. Nature quickly became the production's greatest challenge. The film is filled with sunlit meadows, lush gardens, and crisp mountain air, but behind the scenes, the cast and crew endured relentless rain that often brought shooting to a standstill. What looks like bright summer skies on film was, in reality, carefully timed breaks between downpours. Christopher Plummer, in particular, felt the strain. He was already uneasy about his singing voice being partially dubbed, something that left him frustrated and even considering walking away. Added to that tension was the sheer unpredictability of the weather. Scenes that seemed simple, such as Liesel sneaking into Maria's bedroom window after meeting Rolf, became exhausting. That sequence alone required 15 takes because of rain, lighting, and continuity problems. To simulate the soaking effect, a device called Mr. Rainstorm sprayed cold water over Charmian Carr to keep her drenched between cuts, leaving her shivering throughout. The indoor sets were not the last to finish. Even for the mountains, the roads of gooey mud made the transportation of equipment by vehicle impossible. Cameras, crew, and even Julie Andrews had to be dragged over steep little hills in ox carts. Robert Wise later recalled seeing Andrews bundled up in a fur coat, bouncing in one of those carts, waiting patiently to film the iconic opening shot.